anyone inside, so she closed the closet and spun around. There she saw the head under the bed, the head of a man looking at her with an expressionless stare. She fell to the floor screaming. That's when the closet doors behind her opened and someone grabbed her and pulled her in. The man from under the bed emerged and approached her as she was being held down. The two of them carried her downstairs where they put tape over her mouth and tied her arms together. One checked to make sure the coast was clear before carrying her outside, where they planned to put her in their car's trunk. However, about halfway to their car, a large group of teenagers came riding down on their bikes and witnessed it all. Some of them were screaming for help, while some of them got off their bikes and started to slowly approach the two men. They knew they wouldn't get away with it now, so they dropped in, jumped into their car, and sped away. She was completely awake and conscious throughout all of this. It's unknown why they didn't just tie her up while she was sleeping. The most realistic possibility is that they simply wanted to scare the girl. This may seem like a crazy, rare occurrence, and you may even call it fake. However, things like this happen all the time and are shown commonly on the news. Perhaps they're just the stories we forget about. "22-year-old Garber still lived with his parents. He was the youngest of three, so his two siblings had already moved out and his parents were out 3 to 4 nights a week. This one particular stormy night, he was home alone in his room when he could swear he heard something hit his window. It wasn't insanely weird, as the weather was pretty bad and something may have just blown into his window. However, a second thud at the window sent his heart racing. He lifted his blind and could see somebody standing out there. Even through the damp windows and the pouring rain, he knew he did not recognize that person. He shut the blinds to send the message to go away. However, he wasn't even able to move away from the windowsill before something else was thrown at the window. Garber opened the blind, and this time even the window, and shouted, "What do you want?" The man down below called back, "Come outside, I want to show you something." Garber went downstairs to call the police. They asked him if he was sure that he didn't know the person and if they had caused any damage. The 911 operator asked Garber to call back if the person continued to harass him or showed signs of wanting to break in. Garber hung up the phone. He wanted to see a better view from down in the kitchen, so he opened the kitchen blinds. Garber called the police right back and informed them that the man was standing at his kitchen window and to send somebody right away. The next time he looked back at the kitchen window, the man was gone. That was the last time Garber ever saw that man. I hope you found this video interesting, scary, or just entertaining. If you'd like to hear more Home Alone stuff, I do have a video about 10 true Home Alone stories. There was this time long ago that I was in charge of watching my cousin and his 4 friends while they slept over. My uncle was paying me $100 to watch them for the night. All I did was play video games with a bunch of 10-year-olds for most of the night. I thought it would be the easiest $100 I ever made, but things took a huge turn for the worse when I heard footsteps coming from upstairs. We were in the basement still playing video games. 2 of the kids also heard the sounds. I counted 5 kids sitting on the couches, and neither my aunt or uncle were supposed to be home that night. I swallowed my gum when I realized the basement door was wide open. I told them to stay there while I ran upstairs to shut the door. The door didn't have a lock from the inside, only the outside. I called to the kids to hide in the workout room. I shut the TV and all the lights and then followed the kids into the workout room. We listened in the dark as the footsteps approached the basement door, and then the horrible sound of the basement door opening, followed by heavy steps stomping down each stair one by one. One of my cousin's friends were crying. I had to tell them to shut the hell up. I leaned against the door, with a chair along with a bunch of barbell weights wedged against it. I listened as the door to the boiler room was opened, and a few moments later, closed. Screams of children filled the room as the doorknob to the workout room began to turn. I pushed the door with all my might to keep it shut. Whoever was on the other side quickly gave up as we heard rushed footsteps going up the stairs. I heard the footsteps right above our heads moving in the direction of the front door. This was before everybody had cell phones, so calling somebody first wasn't an option. I scanned the whole house, finding that the front door had been left open and all the bedrooms upstairs had been trashed. Nobody was in the house, so I called the kids up. A few things had been stolen, but as long as nobody was hurt, we were all happy. It was during a blizzard in Valley Stream. I was getting paid $250 to watch some couple's kid while they went away for the weekend. His name was Matthew. This took place on the first night, which was a Friday night. Matthew was already supposedly asleep, while I was in the living room watching a movie. I got a knock at the door, and looked at the clock. It was close to midnight. There was no way I was opening it. Not even 10 seconds later,
Open the door! Open the door!
I heard the sound of 2 or 3 men angrily banging on the door, telling me to open up. I felt like my heart was about to stop. I took a peek through the blinds, and there was somebody standing right on the other side of the window. I fell back in fear, and after managing to get back on my feet, I ran to the kitchen phone first thing to call the police. They said because of the weather, it could take a while for an officer to get here. I was told to take the child and hide somewhere until an officer arrived. They wanted to keep me on the line, but I wasn't thinking clearly in the heat of the moment and hung up. However, it wasn't until I ran through the living room that I realized the banging had stopped. I took a second peek through the living room window. Nobody was there now. I heard the sound of glass shattering from a few rooms over. My knees started to feel weak as I realized they had just broken the window and were about to climb into the house. I had to run and get Matthew. I couldn't just leave without him. Of course, when I got upstairs, there was no time left to run back downstairs, as I already heard footsteps and laughter coming from downstairs. I covered Matthew's mouth with my hand as I ran with him into his toy closet. A few minutes dragged on to what felt like half an hour as we sat there in the dark closet. Matthew began to squeal as footsteps on the carpet reached the outside of his bedroom door. There was more than one person. They came inside. There weren't many places to hide in this room. I was actually reflecting on my whole life, so sure I was gonna die. We heard the sound of a police siren outside, even from in the closet, and then I heard one of the men in the room mutter, "Aw, shit." I opened the door back up as I heard at least 3 pairs of footsteps hurriedly rushing down the stairs. They didn't get far, as the police later found their footprints in the backyard, leading to our shed. There were 5 men in total, and they were all arrested. I was 15 years old, still babysitting since I couldn't get a real job. This was by far the most horrifying experience of my life. Me and this kid I was babysitting, his name was Mike, were taking a walk with his dog through the woods in his backyard. His dog stopped, ears pointed up straight, and paw in the air. The dog started barking, pulling, and going crazy. He noticed something, and we were nervous that it was a black bear, so I told Mike to turn around and walk back to the house. I struggled to pull the dog in the other direction, and then I noticed what he was barking at. Beyond a big tree was some guy just standing there, staring up at me. I yelled out, asking to him if he needed something, and with that, he turned around and walked off. I was genuinely freaked the fuck out. The dog calmed down at this point, so walking back was easier for a few minutes, until yet again, the dog started freaking out about something behind us. I couldn't see what it was, but I was worried it was the same guy as before, and that he might have been following me. I was tempted to unleash the dog on this guy, but that seemed like a bad idea. I didn't look back for the rest of the way back to the house, but the dog continued to bark and pull. I did the best I could to run, or at least walk fast. I made sure for a good half hour that we weren't followed to the house, checking every window and door routinely. I thought it was safe to eventually play Mario Kart with Mike and forget about what happened, but my worst fear came true when right outside the window in the patio, I heard the sound of one of the toy buckets falling over. Turning on the patio light, I could see that a green bucket full of beach toys and balls had been knocked over. There was no way some small animal could do that. The dog was once again going crazy, barking at something. I told Mike to get me his dad's hunting rifle. Maybe that was dumb to have an 8-year-old get a gun for me, but I didn't have time to think rationally. There continued to be strange noises coming from all around the outside of the house. There was some taps on the windows, chimes being pushed, things falling over, but I eventually caught a glimpse of him through one of the windows. He was walking past until he noticed me and stopped. I lifted the gun up to show him that we were armed. He didn't run away right away though. He stood there crouched like some kind of creature, staring right into my soul. He finally walked back into the woods. I didn't sleep much that night, jumping at every small cracking noise. A week later, I got a call from Mike's parents. They told me a creepy-looking man had been stalking their house from the woods. They asked me to describe what the man that I saw looked like again. I couldn't give a good description, as I didn't see much of his face, but I assured them it was the same man. They practically begged me to babysit on a few occasions after this, but I always respectfully declined. That was a while ago, and I have no idea what's become of this family today, and what's become of the man stalking their house. I would frequently babysit back between the ages of 15 and 18. I lived close to a relatively wealthy area where people were more generous in terms of pay. There was never a shortage of need for babysitters either, so I made a decent amount of money. I've definitely had to take care of some stranger kids, but this one takes the prize. Right from the moment I met Michael, he seemed really quiet and weird. He was 12 years old too, which some might argue is more than old enough to be home alone, but maybe not overnight. They needed me to stay overnight. His parents told me he could be a bit strange sometimes and may need some extra attention. I didn't really need to do much though. In the room that I would be sleeping in was a huge toy closet, big enough to fit a big Lego play table with a bunch of Legos and other toys sitting on top of it. Michael was up there for most of his time building with Legos and other toys. I didn't really spy on him too much, I just let him do his own thing. But I heard him constantly talking in there, as if someone were with him, not play talking. I could only assume he had some kind of problems, and that's what his parents were hinting at. He came down eventually to eat some of the leftovers in the fridge, but then went right back up to his closet. It wasn't until I finally told him it was time to go to sleep that he left the closet. I just wanted to go to sleep myself. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to sounds coming from the closet, sounds of toys, like Legos. I called out to Michael to go to sleep. The sound stopped. The light wasn't on in the closet, so I was confused as to how the hell he could be playing in the dark. I went over to open the closet and turn the light on. Michael didn't seem to be in there. I dismissed the noises. I wasn't a paranoid person. I fell back asleep. I'd say an hour later, I woke up to partial brightness in the room. The closet light was on, but the door was shut. I called Michael's name again. I was pissed now. I saw the outlines of feet at the bottom of the closet door, and then heard a little giggle as if Michael were messing with me. I knew he was in there now. I marched over and threw open the door, and literally fell back in horror when nobody at all was in there. Where the two outlines of feet were, there was nothing now. I felt a pain in my chest from the fear. I ran to Michael's room to find him asleep in his bed. I locked his door and laid down on his floor. Just being next to another person made me feel a little safer. I fell asleep on the floor, and when the parents returned the next day, I decided to keep quiet about what I witnessed. I say what I witnessed because I know what happened. I got paid and left, and never had to worry about it again. Of course, it still sends chills up my spine thinking about it, and I still have no idea what to believe. A couple weeks ago, my dad came home and pitched me a small job offer. One of his coworkers was going away for a few days and needed somebody he could trust to watch over his house. The reason my dad pitched this to me was because the man's house has a big CCTV system, basically a camera in every room, and then an operating desk where all screens could be watched on a big monitor. And I'm a computer science major, so my dad just always assumes that I know how to work anything technological. The man told my dad that he'd pay me $200 for the 2 days just to watch the house. Whatever that meant. My dad drove me to the house and introduced me to the man, whose name doesn't matter. The man made it seem like he preferred I stay in the upstairs room with the monitors as opposed to roaming the house all day. That was fine with me though. So when I wasn't eating, I was mostly just sitting in that room with the TV on in the background and doing schoolwork on my laptop. Ironically, the thing I was doing the least was keeping an eye on the monitors. Night came. I started wondering where in the house I should sleep, since surprisingly we hadn't discussed that. So I sat back down at the desk and looked at all the different rooms on the screens to see which rooms had beds or couches. I noticed something I wasn't expecting to notice though. The back screen door was open downstairs. I didn't remember it being open. I looked through each and every camera screen in a panic. In the living room, a closet door was open. This one I knew wasn't open earlier. I texted my dad to call the man and ask him if he came back home. Meanwhile, I continued watching the screen. On the grainy, dark image, a tall person who resembled only a black shadow on the screen stepped out from the closet. I pulled my arms off the desk as I covered my mouth with my hands in shock. As I did this, however, my left elbow pulled some heavy object from the desk onto the floor, creating a big thud. The person in the image very clearly moved their head up to the ceiling as a response to the noise. They went for the stairs, walking up very, very slowly, step by step. Meanwhile, I got a text back from my dad saying, "No, he's not. I just spoke to him half an hour ago. Why?" I got so caught up in my phone texting my dad to send help that I didn't even pay attention to the monitor. There was a knock at the door. I looked at it and then the screens. The first screen I laid my eyes on was the one showing the person outside the door to the room I was in. When I remembered that door had no lock, the only thing I could think to do was jump out the window into the bushes below. I ran halfway down the block and then stopped when my dad called me. I had him call his friend and ask him if he was expecting somebody in the house. The man said he had no relatives or friends who had his key or would ever let themselves into his home. So he called the cops and had them review the footage. I got to watch all of it, and it showed everything. From the moment the intruder broke the glass to the backyard door, to the moment I jumped out the window and him running away shortly after. The intruder was never found. The footage was just too dark to identify his face. One day I agreed to house it for a friend just for the night. He and his family were going on a short vacation and needed somebody to watch their pets and house. I agreed to do it for a small amount of money. I'd been to his house many times before, so I was familiar with the layout. Nothing eventful happened at all the entire day. I just fed the 2 cats, the fish, and the birds. I went to sleep on the couch in the sunroom because it was my favorite room in their house. It was a tiny room surrounded by windows with a big TV mounted on the wall. I fell asleep with the TV on, but I woke up not long after. I turned it off, and now the room was dark. I tried to go back to sleep, but I thought I heard the sound of the PVC gate closing outside. I thought it might have just been the wind. The room had windows surrounding it in 3 directions, so I was basically looking around in a circle out into the darkness. I sat back down on the couch when I calmed down, but I heard a leaf crunching outside. That's when I knew someone was out there. I took another look outside. There was literally somebody pressed up against the glass to the window behind the couch. They were looking in, but I didn't know if they could see me or not. I yelled as loud as I could at them to fuck off. I'm not a big dude, but whoever this guy was appeared to be, so I wasn't going out there. Shockingly, this didn't scare the person away. In fact, they walked over to the back door and tried the doorknob. I ran to get the phone, and then I yelled into the sunroom, "I'm calling the police." Thankfully, this worked. He ran off. I didn't actually call the cops, though. Instead, I texted my friend just to let him know of an almost break-in. I slept through the night in an upstairs bedroom, locked. The next morning, my friend's family returned to find all of the tires on their sedan that was left behind had been slashed. We speculated that somebody who had it out for their family and knew of the vacation they were taking had some kind of plan to break in. But when that failed, they settled for this. That's just speculation, but still, it's the least terrifying explanation to me. When I was in college, I used to work as a babysitter on the side to make a little extra cash. One day I saw an ad posted in the library that was requesting a house sitter for the weekend and to inquire through phone. I was used to babysitting, but house sitting sounded even better, same thing minus taking care of kids. So I called the number as soon as I got home and spoke with a guy named Chuck. I met him that Friday and he showed me around the house. He and his wife eventually went on their way and I was left alone in the house. I was given one of the spare upstairs bedrooms. I say one of because there were a few. The house was huge. Nothing out of the ordinary was going on at all for the whole day. It was quite uneventful, and I felt like I was missing out on going out since it was a Friday night. But I kept reminding myself that I'd be making $200 for the whole weekend. Later in the night, I kind of just laid in the guest bed that I'd be sleeping in and watched a movie on demand. I wondered why this couple felt the need to hire somebody to watch their house for the whole weekend. There weren't any pets or anything after all. Though it was a very, very nice house, so it seemed the most obvious that they just wanted a sense of security for their house while they were gone. By the time I turned off the TV, I was shot and probably minutes away from falling asleep. But the slight sound of a click, along with a sudden glow in the room, woke me completely. I opened my eyes fully to see light creeping out from under the crack of a door. It took me a second to realize that it was a closet door. I flipped on my side as my heart started beating 200 beats a minute. I pulled the sheets up to my chin and pretended to be asleep. I was certain someone was in that closet, and I was simply too afraid to get out of that bed and make any noises. Words can't describe my fear in that bed, or how with each passing minute I felt more and more like I could possibly die. The closet door opened, I could hear it, but I could not see it as I was facing the opposite way. I closed my eyes and tried my best not to move. The room went dark again as I heard another click, a bit louder this time. The closet door quietly closed in the background, but I didn't hear anything else. I was afraid that whoever it was went back into the closet. I didn't know what to do because they had to have seen me and I didn't want to run for it in fear of being chased. The room was dead silent as I was thinking over my next course of action. Eventually, I decided to just peek over to the other side and make sure the coast was clear. I flipped on my other side. Someone was standing right next to the bed, with their hand reaching towards me. My reaction, I pulled my arms up towards me, balled up and backed up onto the wall in shock. The person stood there showing no signs of leaving. I hopped over the metal bar at the end of the bed, ran for the door, down the stairs, and then out the front door. I ran all the way home, let myself in, called Chuck and explained. I told him it was his problem now and hung up. He tried calling back, but I didn't answer. Maybe there was some story to be told, like they knew this person, or they frequently dealt with break-ins and that's why they needed me. I didn't care though. I didn't even care about the money. I just didn't want to speak to that Chuck guy ever again, or see that house ever again. It was an ordinary evening like any other. I was in my room watching TV while my mom was downstairs making dinner. I had my door shut as I usually did because I like my privacy. My room actually connected to the attic, because technically my room was never meant to be a bedroom, but it was made into one since I was one of 4 kids. So oftentimes I would hear little cracks in the ceiling just because the attic was right above my room, and there were heavy boxes putting constant pressure on the ceiling, so I was a little used to it. But there was one crack that was just too loud. So loud that it actually made me jump. I almost wanted to pull the attic door down and go up there, but I gave it the benefit of the doubt and assumed it was just pressure. That and the fact that I was also scared to go up there. I was scared of that attic my entire childhood, and I hated having it connected to my room. During dinner, I told my mom about the abnormally loud crack and expressed my fear to her. She told me there's nothing up there besides boxes, junk, and mice. She followed the mice part up with a smile to let me know she was kidding. The rest of the night after dinner, I stayed in my room watching TV and playing video games. Even after everyone went to bed, I was still playing, deep into the night. I had the volume lower so that I wouldn't wake anyone up. We had paper-thin walls in that house. I thought I heard another crack in the ceiling, not as loud as the one from earlier, but still concerning enough to make me pause the game and listen. There was nothing now. I was having a bit of an adrenaline rush, so I grabbed the stepladder and pulled down the attic door. There was no light up there, you just had to use a flashlight to navigate. I didn't go in though, I just peeked my head in through the opening. There was nothing I could see except piles on top of piles of boxes. So it seemed like it really was just the weight of one of the boxes putting pressure in the ceiling. I planned on telling my mom that we should check it out the next day. I was a bit relieved as I went back to playing video games. I turned the game off about an hour later and finally decided to go to sleep. After a while though, I started to hear something from above me. It wasn't the regular cracks I was used to hearing. These were more like thumps. They were constant and moving. It literally sounded like footsteps. The thump stopped right above the attic door, and there was silence. I stared at that attic door so intently, waiting for something to happen, but when I saw the door slowly begin to lift, it didn't feel real. Even though I was expecting something to happen, I wasn't prepared for the door to actually open. I got out of bed as quietly as I could and tiptoed to my mom's room. When I explained, she nudged me to stay in her room as she left to get my brothers. After a minute of waiting in silence, I heard a commotion from my room. It was my 2 older brothers yelling aggressively, and my mom screaming at them to come here. Apparently whoever was in the attic was gone though, because both of my brothers went up there and didn't find anyone. My mom also heard the noises in the attic, but didn't know what to think of it until I came and told her about the door opening. I didn't hear any noises anymore after that day, except for the usual occasional cracks in the ceiling.
For a while I rented out a small single-family house in a town close to my job. It was only a temporary thing. I only planned on being there for a few months at most. The landlord was hard to get along with because he seemed off, so that didn't help things really. It was the first week of my being there. Since it was just me living in the house, I didn't need a lot of space to store things. The house did have an attic, but I never felt the need to go up there. I just stored mostly everything in either the garage, the spare rooms, or the closets. Not that there was much living space though. One day though, I did kind of want to see how